Well, welcome back to our intermission segment here, where we're going to look back on some past players. And joining us for this period is going to be Mikael Lickteig. Michael, thank you for joining us today and for sharing some of your insight and memories of playing with the Flyers. Michael, why don't you just start out by just talk to us a little bit about growing up playing hockey in Little Falls.
Sure, of course. Thanks for having me, Mark, by the way. Started when I was about 4 or 5 years old. My brother was a big inspiration for me. He's 10 years older than me. So anything the big bro does, you want to do and follow his footsteps. And at that age, when you're 4 or 5 years old and you see your brother making the big slap shot or the big hit, it might as well be the NHL to you for that perspective. In fact, he used to always shoot on me. So there's a lot of pictures of me when I was young. I wanted to be a goalie for like the first 3 or 4 years, but my mom and the coaches kind of put a stop to that. They convinced me that I was a better forward, and I think thankfully they were right on that one. And then I was always kind of undersized, POEs, Bantams, and even kind of my first few years of high school, I was kind of the smaller, the runt of the team. But it wasn't until like 6th or 7th grade I became best friends with Steve Fessler, who at that time was like the first, I would say, Little Falls phenom player. Like he was dominating every level he was at. We were in the same grade, but he was a full year older than me. So I only got to play with him every other year, but he was kind of like my inspiration to get much better. You know, he's your best friend and he's getting all these accolades and everyone's talking about him. And I just wanted to get to his level so bad because he was so much bigger, faster, and stronger than me. And my mom kind of saw this out of me. She knew that I wanted to get to his level. And she provided like every opportunity possible. She was driving me down to the cities like 2-3 times a week in the spring and the summer just for these AAA practices and these tryouts, and waiting just for like an hour practice, waiting for me to get out of the rink too, because I used to be the last one in the locker room. She's the most patient person ever. I could never repay her back for all the time and effort she's put into my development as a hockey player. And my dad was also pretty supportive as well in a different way. He, no matter how I played, he thought I played good. He didn't really understand the game as much. Funny story is I made select 15s one year, and it was a big deal for me. I think it's called high performance now. And it was my first game, and my mom couldn't make it. So he brought me down, and I just told him, Dad, I'm number 10. It's a big game. I'll see you after the game. And I ended up playing a pretty good game. I think I scored. And I was super excited to come talk to him after the game. But I noticed during the game, I couldn't find him. So I figured he likes to stay warm. Maybe he's in the mezzanine watching. And I'm walking up out of the rink and I don't see him. But there were 2 rinks at New Hope, it's New Hope Arena. So I walk to the other rink and I see him watching the other game. And I tap him on the shoulder and he looks over at me like he just saw a ghost. And he watched the wrong kid play the entire game. And that's in a nutshell like my dad's support. He's like, oh, I thought you looked a little different. And to his defense, the kid had the same gloves, kind of the same helmet as me, but he was just supportive no matter how I played. I could play the worst game ever, and it was, you played great, son. So it was a little bit different, like kind of like the anti-hockey dad in terms of overbearing. You know, they were just, both my parents were super, super supportive. And then finally, I would say senior year, going to the senior year, I finally hit my growth spurt. I think I gained like 4 or 5 inches, gained about 20, 30 pounds, and I gained a ton of speed. And that's kind of, senior year is where I kind of made my breakout and kind of noticed that I might have a chance now to get to that next level of my dream of playing Division I hockey.
Cool. Were there any coaches that really stood out to you in your youth development?
Oh, of course. My first coach was the late Dave Cook. I remember doing those straight line skating drills with putting our sticks up on top of the net. And I used to always complain, but he could obviously tell that I needed the work. Also Verdinez, Tom Ulatello, Rick Parker, Josh Solom. Those were kind of, and Mr. Stark too, of course. He coached me in Pewey's for a bit. He used to call me the Energizer Bunny because I was a little guy and I used to get knocked down constantly, and I'd always just get back up and keep going and keep going. And a special moment for me was when Dave Cook moved to Duluth and I got to play against Duluth, the Bulldogs, in college, and he was there for the game. And that was kind of like a special, like, circular moment to come around. Like, he was the original person teaching me how to skate. and I made it to that level for him to watch that. That was pretty rewarding.
Yeah, I'm sure that was. So, Michael, you were on that first team from Little Falls that qualified for the state tournament back in 2005. You beat Wadena in a game 4-1. Wadena had beaten you guys the year before in the section championship game. Talk a little bit about that win over Wadena and what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, going into that game, the days leading up to it, just a ton of nerves, not a lot of sleep. You know, Little Falls up to that point was pretty much, it felt like we were cursed. Especially like the year before, I felt like we were the better team. We hit a couple posts in that last little minute, and then we kind of turned it over and gave them a chance to win it in the last few seconds. And pretty heartbreaking, especially heartbreaking for those seniors that we couldn't deliver for them, and Kucher. Obviously, you just feel like there's something wrong. There's something wrong with Little Falls. We're just cursed. And then finally, game started, I think in the second or third shift, Steve and I connected for a nice little 2-on-1. And then it felt like just like, okay, we're settled in. And then the baby line with Jared Fessler, Bo Hanowski, and Lukey Jorgensen scored a really nice goal on the power play, I think, to go up 2-0. And then it was like, okay, we got this. And I think we finally went 4-0. But when they scored their one goal, everyone was like, oh no, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But luckily, we held them off. I think that year every team in the section we beat by 3 or 4 goals. We had a pretty solid team, and it just felt really good to deliver for Kucher finally. You can see there's a clip I made of the highlights of that game and also the state game, but the clip of Kucher and the coaches celebrating is one of the coolest moments on that little video.
That's very cool. So you've won this big game. Now you're headed down to the X to partake in the state tournament. What was that like, that preparation, getting ready to head to the X?
Yeah, I mean, it was all new for all of us, right? Like coaches as well. We didn't really know what to expect. You know, you have the big dinner with all the teams there, meeting everybody, and you know, seeing the city, and you know, you're playing. I think we were scheduled to play the last game of the day on Wednesday, and it's prime time, right?
Right.
And I think we were a bit overwhelmed by that, and we also started. I think we started almost an hour and a half later than we were supposed to. I remember certain guys almost falling asleep in the locker room. I don't think we started until like 9:30, maybe closer to 10, because of the game before us went into overtime. And then, yeah, we played a really good team. I think that Duluth Marshall that had a future Hobie Baker Award winner, along with like 6 or 7 other guys that went to the Division I level, and they stepped on us pretty good. I think their first 3 shots found a way to go in. But a special moment, I guess, for myself and Steve, we were both able to score our one game at the X for the state tournament. So that was something that was pretty special that you can kind of take away from that first game.
What was the reaction like from the community and from the fans to this new adventure of going to the X for the state
Yeah,
tournament?
I mean, after the game, getting like after the section final game, getting a police escort all the way back to town, and people waiting for us and celebrating, and then I looking up in the stands during the opening announcement of our names, and just seeing, look, it's all Little Falls people, right? Like we're playing a private school, so that entire bowl was pretty much the entire town, and you know, chanting our names, and it was just cool to see everybody together, all your friends that you grew up with, friends and family you grew up with, watching, supporting you. You know, I have friends on the basketball team, football team. They got their chest painted, and pretty cool moment to do that for your town, right?
Yep. So from there, Michael, you went on to play at Michigan Tech, as you mentioned a little bit ago. Talk to us about that experience, what that was like playing at the D1 level.
Sure. So originally, I didn't know a ton about Michigan Tech. I played a couple years of juniors, and I was recruited by teams like UConn, Bemidji State, a little bit by Mankato, and even St. Cloud was sort of offering a walk-on. But I was pretty much committed to go to Air Force until after my last game of junior. Michigan Tech came calling, and I never really knew much about them, right? I knew that they're in the WCHA, so they're going to play against the Gophers, North Dakota, all the big town teams. And I started, you do your Google search and you find out like Michigan Tech was maybe the most dominant team in college hockey in the 60s and 70s. And it's just a hockey crazy area of the country. And so they invited me up for a visit and offered me a spot. And I couldn't, the place is just absolutely gorgeous. Looks like a miniature Duluth. So I hopped on that right away, and I love the rink. The rink is awesome. Everything about it, the jerseys, the colors, yeah, and the coaches were great. So yeah, I hopped on that. Couldn't hesitate, I guess.
And talk a little bit about your playing career there at Michigan Tech in some of the big, maybe a couple of the big games that you got a chance to play in.
Sure. Some big highlights, I guess, were I think games that I got to play against Jared and Ben when they were at Jared Fessler and Ben Hanowski when they were playing at St. Cloud, and playing against them. Tony that was there and came out on the ice and took a few pictures with us, and that was a cool moment. Every year I played against the Gophers. We beat them. That was always special because they were always my childhood team, and beating them always felt good. And then we won our GLI my senior year, which is a big deal for us. It's a tournament that we play every year with Michigan, Michigan State, and typically Western Michigan. And I think we beat Michigan 4-0 the first game, and then Western Michigan again 4-0. And it was the first time we won it since 1981, which is pretty crazy considering it's a tournament of only 4 teams. So
Sure.
delivering that trophy back to that city was a very, very big deal. And I didn't realize it until we won it. And I mean, there was banners and pictures everywhere of us raising that trophy. And it still is when I go back and visit. You can still see it.
Well, that's very cool. So then when your playing days kind of settled down, you looked to a little bit different sport called bandy. Tell us a little bit about bandy and your involvement in that.
Yeah, I kind of just stumbled upon this game that's it's I absolutely love it, but it's the rink is the size of a soccer field. You play with a ball and a smaller stick, and your skate blades are actually like longer and flatter, and you don't really put much of an edge on them, so you don't really stop and start much. It's just pure speed. And that kind of became why I was recruited at Michigan Tech, was more my speed. And so the transition to bandy really fit pretty well. And my first year playing, I got asked to go over to Russia to play for the USA team. And I mean, it was an eye opener. Absolutely fell in love with the game, so much so that I got asked again to go play in Sweden professionally. And I kind of decided to hop on that train for a little bit and played 1 year in Sweden and 1 year in Norway to get that out of my system, kind of. And it was an absolute blast.
Are you still playing today?
Yeah, actually, in a month, 2 months, we go to Sweden for the World Championships again. So we're gearing up for that right now. It's a ton of preparation. Got to get back into shape because you're skating. It's 90-minute matches, and you're on the ice 70 minutes of those 90 matches typically. So it's a lot to get back into bandy shape. Trust me, it's a little different than hockey.
Well, that's very cool that you're playing on the national team for that. Michael, as you think back to your time in Little Falls, what did it mean to you to put on that Flyer jersey?
I mean, one of the cooler, unique things that you recognize when you play with other players from around the country, Minnesota hockey in general is truly, truly special. Most of the kids that I played with at Michigan Tech, they don't know what it's like to play for their hometown or their high school. They typically have to play midgets or junior hockey where they got to travel somewhere in the area, and they're kind of put together with like a superstar team. Minnesota hockey is super cool that you can grow up with the same group of kids and achieve something special. So being able to do that for Little Falls, and let alone being it for the first team for Little Falls, and then kind of putting Little Falls on the map, right? When I was younger, when I'd come down to the cities to play, nobody knew where I was from. They thought I was from International Falls or Thief River Falls. But now that I live in the cities, I say I'm from Little Falls, everyone thinks of a hockey town. So I'm very, very proud of kind of where Tony has been able to lead this program kind of into a bigger name, I guess.
And talk a little bit about playing for Kuchar. What was that like from your?
I love Kuchar. He was always good at noticing when we were and were not prepared for a game. And he wasn't afraid to get in my face because he knew when I needed it and when to motivate me, especially. And at the time, nobody likes that, right? Nobody likes being pushed and getting out of their comfort zone. But when I look back at all the coaches I've had, the coaches that weren't afraid to push me were the coaches that cared the most. And I don't think anybody cares as much as Kuchar. And Kuchar has a special heart in our entire family. I think my brother played on the first team that Kuchar ever coached back in '93, I believe. And he was a bit of a handful, my brother. And even Kuchar made this list of all the infractions my brother ever did playing for the team. And a lot of them involved me, like missed practice because he had to pick up his little brother from school, or shows up without his sticks, or show up to a game on a snowmobile. And funny enough, my brother got married about 3-4 years ago, or 5 years ago, and I was the best man. And in the best man speech, I brought that list out and talked about his relationship with Kuchar. So he's had a big soft spot in our heart, our entire family's heart, really.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, Michael, I really want to thank you for joining us for this intermission segment and sharing your perspective on Flyer hockey and some of what you experienced growing up playing in Little Falls, but then also going on and playing at the collegiate level. I really just I've enjoyed getting the opportunity to know you a little bit more, and hope to see you around the rink soon.
Sure thing. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Michael Lickteig, a 2005 graduate of Little Falls High School and one of the players on the 100 point club list for Little Falls. We'll be back with the period summary in just a second.